Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Shannon Zeman, and thank you for joining us today on the most important 15 minutes of your day, where we share expert information on safety and preparedness that you can use in your everyday life. Did you know that over 1.6 million Americans are living with type 1 diabetes? Well, joining me today is Cura Hume, a wife, homemaker, and special needs mom. Cura and her husband homeschool their two boys and enjoy the flexibility it allows them to personalize their oldest son's education and care needs. After their son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, they realized just how little was known by the public, including themselves. So she is here today to give us a crash course on what type 1 diabetes is and how it impacts a person's daily life and ways that we can advocate for this invisible chronic disease. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So this topic, when we kind of talked about it and we're coming up with the idea for this, it was really interesting to me because I will be quite honest, I don't know anything about diabetes. I know that it's a difficult thing to have, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So let's just start there. So what is type 1 diabetes?
Yeah. So type 1 diabetes is actually an autoimmune disease. And so that means that your body is having a reaction to itself and attacking itself. It's not a disease that is preventable or curable. It's something that you get and you will potentially have for the rest of your life. Type 1 diabetes compared to type 2 is usually the most common that people kind of think about when they hear diabetes. That usually has to do with like diet and being overweight, but there is also a genetic compound to that one as well. People can be predisposed for it just like genetically. But type 1 diabetes, you can't do anything to not get it.
So that's really interesting how I didn't realize it was an autoimmune disease. So that's very interesting how that works. So what are the symptoms that we look for?
For most people, the biggest symptom that they realize is excessive thirst. And for us, that's what we noticed in our son Jace. The day before he was diagnosed, we were out and he kept asking for water and water and water. And we were going, what is going on? You know, it's not that hot out, you know, we're eating and we're doing regular activity.
Right.
It was kind of strange. So when we just Googled excessive thirst, diabetes came up. And because we had no knowledge of that or what it meant or, you know, how serious or, you know, oh, is this something that we can just go to the doctor for and then be over?
Right.
We made a call to our urgent care and they said, no, bring them in. It could be a sign of diabetes. There's ways that we can do some non-invasive testing just to kind of rule it out. But just come by. It's better to be safe than sorry. The symptoms for most people includes excessive thirst, which then leads to excessive urination. But people, if you have a prolonged high blood sugar, you can start having like dizziness, vision issues, hard time focusing, and just kind of an overall feeling of just lethargic and tired. Your body is just really what your body is doing is eating away at itself, but you don't realize it. It's from the inside.
Wow.
And so it can go on for several months without being diagnosed. And so these people usually end up in what's called diabetic ketoacidosis, which is where there's too much sugar in your body. There's not enough insulin to break it down. And so your body starts eating away at itself. And so you can end up in the hospital. So paying attention to something as, I mean, it sounds silly, but as small as excessive thirst out of nowhere, kind of unexplained,
Right.
Can be a big difference of like a long hospital stay or even death.
Wow. And how old was he when when he was diagnosed?
He was 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And does this run in your family or anything?
We have no family history of autoimmune diseases. So it caught us completely off guard.
Right.
Doctors still aren't really sure how or why. They know that there's a genetic compound. Doctors aren't really sure of what causes it, but they have found connections with viruses, like overcoming a virus, and also environmental things that can happen to you. And so most people are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as children, but you can be diagnosed as an adult. At the time when our son was diagnosed, the only people we knew who had type 1 were both diagnosed in their 20s. Oh. And so it was a complete shock to us. Yeah. And also kind of a new world that we had to kind of just get thrown into as far as how to deal with it on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't imagine because I have no clue about it. So yeah. It would have been the same kind of thing. Yeah. So is there a cure for type 1 diabetes?
As of right now, there is no cure for type 1 diabetes. When you have a autoimmune response, your pancreas, the cells, the beta cells, your body starts attacking those. And so your body can no longer make insulin on its own. That's for type 1. Type 2, which is separate, but type 2 means that your body's making less or it can't process it as well. Okay. Type 1 diabetics cannot make any insulin. You need insulin in order to process the food, the sugars and carbs in the food that you eat. And so since there's no cure, that means that the only way to, daily deal with it is to have an insulin regimen. And so those who are type 1 will have to have some sort of insulin, either through manual injections. So like you'll see, people filling syringes. There's also a pen option that's a little more discreet and easier to use if you're on the go, or a pump. And so that's attached to their body and constantly giving them insulin like your pancreas will. Oh,
okay. So it's a shame that there's not a cure yet, but being able to manage it in some fashion. And is there a chance that you could grow out of it, or just it's once you've got it, you've got it? Wow. Yeah. So there's nothing that would make your body kick back on to producing insulin if you're type 1. Type 2 diabetics can have luck with different diets, and exercise is sometimes found to help them process the insulin better. But for type 1 diabetics, there's nothing they can do. Their body will not make insulin again. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So let's go into like common myths about type 1 diabetes, or, what they can and can't eat. Yeah. Well, I know for us, a lot of questions that our family and friends had when he was first diagnosed was, well, did he eat too much sugar? Or, was he eating too much junk? And if you've met my son, he's, it's a tiny little thing. That was not the issue. Type 1 diabetics, it has nothing to do with their diet. They actually need carbs and could need sugar if they have what's called a hypoglycemic incident, and that's where they have a low blood sugar. And so a lot of times the movies, you're talking about myths, the movies get it wrong, because if somebody is having a case of low blood sugar, they need sugar or carbs, quick acting carbs. So you'll see them, drinking juice or eating fruit snacks. A lot of adults just use glucose tabs, which is just like, it looks like a giant Smartie. Okay. And that is to get sugar into their system to raise their blood sugar back to a normal level so that they can function. I know, for law enforcement, sometimes people who are having a low blood sugar episode can appear like they're drunk or lethargic, and they're not sure if they're actually under the influence of something or having a low sugar incident. And so it can be kind of scary for those involved in those situations when the person's not, able to communicate or tell them what's going on. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's something that I didn't know. I thought it would have been the opposite, right? Removing that everything. So what are some ways that we can help in advocating for people that, have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and, are living with this? Yeah, I think the big thing is just the jokes. I mean, a lot of people are uneducated when it comes to type 1 diabetes. And so there are those jokes and, memes of, that cake, it's diabetes. Diabetes intensifies. Those are actually really dangerous jokes for these, children and young adults who have diabetes and are then feeling like people are judging them for what they're eating. And then they're either scared to eat in front of somebody, which could cause a low, or they're scared to take their injections because they're worried that they're going to be judged. Right. And both of them are dangerous in their own ways. Low blood sugar can lead to death. Sustained high blood sugars can lead to health conditions as they're older. And so that's a big advocacy, just understanding that these people are dealing with monitoring their blood sugar day in, day out. It is a 24/7 job. Yeah. I mean, there has been
advances in technology. There's, insulin pumps that, help so that the injections are more discreet. There's also continual glucose monitors, which is a way that they can know what their blood sugar is doing at that moment without having to prick themselves several times a day before meals, in the middle of the night when they're sleeping. I mean, this is something that they will have to deal with for the rest of their life or until there is a cure.
Wow.
Yeah, it really is a serious disease that not a lot of people know about, because unless you know the things to look for, like a pump or, somebody's glucose monitor, they look just like everybody else. And so it is one of those, invisible illnesses that a lot of people don't understand. They probably know somebody who has it and they just don't realize it.
I don't realize it. Wow. And then, so like, what if someone, how do you see, like you're talking about when police or somebody sees it and you might think that they're drunk, or how would we know that somebody has type 1 diabetes and needs help to get to an emergency or anything like that? What would be things that we could do to help?
Well, so when our son was diagnosed, and for many type 1 diabetics, they do recommend that you wear a medical alert bracelet. And so if you're in a circumstance where you thought somebody, they don't really smell like alcohol, but they're acting strange, you could look for medical jewelry. So a bracelet, sometimes women will wear a necklace, also things that they might have with them. So if you notice that they have a small bottle of insulin, or that they're carrying, it's an adult and they're carrying a pack of glucose tabs, you can ask them, are you diabetic, and see if they'll have enough consciousness to be able to respond in a way to get that help. Because really it could be as easy as, just getting them some juice or something if you're in a situation where emergency personnel can't get there quick enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. And I thought it was really interesting, the story you were telling me about sodas. And so I would love for you to share this, to educate people on this. It's very interesting. So
well, I mean, I know right now there is a big push for these low carb diets and keto and all this kind of, trying to watch your carbs. And so a lot of times people will order sugar-free or low carb drink options. So let's say you go to get fast food and you order a Diet Coke. Well, Diet Coke has no carbs in it. And so carbs are what a diabetic actually doses for, not the sugar. So just because something is sugar-free doesn't mean that it doesn't have carbs. So they're going to be dosed. They're going to be looking at the carbs in that product, and they're going to say, okay, well, this is Diet Coke. It has 0 carbs. I don't need to take an injection for it. Well, if the person, for some reason, either maliciously or accidentally gives them a regular soda, it's going to have up to 100 carbs depending on the serving size. When they consume that, and because glycemic wise, a soda is going to hit your blood sugar super quick compared to if you ate a piece of bread that had carbs in it, they're going to start feeling nauseous. They're going to start feeling like when you've had a carb heavy meal and just that kind of icky feeling. If they don't have their insulin on them, it could even lead them to having elongated issues that day, trying to get their blood glucose back into a manageable number, where they're going up, they're going down, they're not feeling well, they're having a hard time when they go back to work or to school even. And so really the advocacy for just, if somebody asks for a diet or a sugar-free product, be aware that it could be because they have a disease that makes it that much easier for them to manage. And so it's really important that you're honest with them. Maybe the sugar-free product was out of, all out. Tell them, hey, I know you ordered sugar-free, but all we have is regular, because that can be a big difference for them in their management that day and how they go about feeling for the rest of the day.
So I thought that was really interesting, and just on those little things, taking account of just those little things and how, to pay attention. It might be really important to someone's well-being and sense of healthiness, and everything. So, well, thank you. I appreciate it so much. Time flies. I know she has so much more information for us, and we'll definitely have to touch on this again. And I really appreciate you taking the knowledge that you gained from a very unfortunate situation and using that to educate and empower the people with it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I do. Well, next week, Clayton Cranford will be here, the cyber safety cop, and he's going to join us in discussing the importance of using screen time limits to help our kids be happier. A great topic. So thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You've been listening to the most important 15 minutes of your day with me, Shannon Zeman, and you can listen to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And remember, with knowledge, you have the power.